So, Melly, why don't we actually start out with those 3 words? What did you mean when you said that at the commencement?
Well, first of all, I have to just say I'm beyond overwhelmed, both with video and Jeffrey's words. Jeffrey is my bigger, older brother, my smaller big brother. And we've spent a lot of time in a foxhole together. I'm so grateful for my friendship with him. You have no idea. Jeffrey is a lifeline to me on many occasions, including recently, when I took him at a meeting and I said it's an SOS, and I was choked up on the phone as he was guiding me through. But he is a dear, dear soul, and thank you so much. I can't ever thank you enough for all the opportunity you've given me, including being chairman of DreamWorks. And he's also a lot to manage.
Oh, that part.
What I meant by just add bravery is that I think fear keeps people from accomplishing a lot in life, and I've watched it time and time and time again, that fear leads people to shrink instead of lean into the opportunities that are at hand. And I just believe that if we can conquer our fears, we can do a lot more. And I tell people, you know, being brave is not the absence of fear. This is not my own quote. It's just an obvious statement. It's overcoming them. That's what courage is. And so in just adding bravery, I thought about in everything that you do, if you could just be a little braver, I think it would make a difference for yourself and also for society. And I see that in meetings. I see it in all aspects of life. And I always ask myself, when I do feel my own fear, what is the worst thing that could happen to me? And when you really play it out, it's not much. And so as a result of that, I've really just pushed this idea of bravery in everything that I think about. It's become a singularly signature idea for me. And I read this story about this woman who said that every day she told her daughter before she left, not that she loved her, but to be brave. And when she wrote to her in college, she would write her letters and sign them, "Be brave." And I now say that to my daughter, be brave, because I think to give someone the ability to have courage as they go out into the world that we all live in today is a real asset.
Thank you. So Coach Wooden admired so much the advice that he got from his dad and the influence that he had on him. And I would love you to talk a little bit about your mom and, you know, those influences and how those values have stayed with you.
Well, first of all, I'm welling up because I'm thinking about what my mom would think of this. And my mom was very basic in so many ways. I've described her as being brutally pragmatic. My mom used to tell things to me all the time, like if you told her something wasn't fair, she'd say, "Life is not fair. Get over it." So she was very, very direct. But I've told this story that when I was 5 years old and I wondered what Santa would bring me for Christmas, my mother looked at me and she said, "Mommy is Santa." And the Tooth Fairy, and the Easter Bunny, and she went through the whole list. She just knocked it all out. And even then, I was like, this is not right. You know, this is just not right. But she had this pragmatism about her, and even as I accomplished things and things that she could see, she made it clear to me that I'd be grounded and rooted in reality. And I remember when I was working at Ariel and I'd be so busy and so many things would be going on, my mother would do things like call the office and my assistant would say, she's in a meeting, and she says, no, you didn't understand. This is her mother. Take her out of the meeting. And it would be something nonsensical that she would want. If I told her I was really tired, she'd say, you know, even the president can take naps. She would talk about George Bush, and she was like, Mellody, last time I checked, you weren't the axis that the world was revolving around. So that was the mother that I had. But at the same time, she was incredibly loving, and she was really kind. And my mother, as an adult, would walk down the street holding my hand. And when I lived until I was 18 years old, I shared a room with my mom and slept in the same bed with her. And I still turned out okay. But because that was the circumstances in which we lived. So we were close, but we were different. And her advice was always very, very simple to me. She said her goal for me was to just be, because she thought I was very restless. And she wanted me to have a calm and kind heart. I think I got to the kind part. I don't think I got to the calm part for her. But she was a tremendous person who never saw or experienced many of the things I experienced, would not understand them, but she rooted for me every single day.
Talk about some of the values that, as a child, literally as a 6, 8, 10, 12-year-old, some of the incredible lessons I've heard you talk about them.
Well, she was just a pragmatic. So I've told this story in my TED Talk about coming home from school, from a party, a birthday party when I was 7 years old, and my mother said, "How did they treat you?" And I was like, "How did they treat me?" I was like, "You mean like, how was the cake?" And she was like, "No." She looked at me and she said, "They won't always treat you well." And she was being very clear about what I was going to be up against with race and gender. And she made no bones about it. She was like, "Listen, it's just," I remember coming home from first grade. I had a teacher, I had a very, very, very hard time in first grade, so badly that they put me in remedial second grade, where the kids beat me up because I was a first grader in second grade. And they didn't put me there because I was advancing. I just couldn't live in this classroom with this teacher. And I said to my mom, I said, "I think she's racist." I'm 7, right? And my mom looks at me and she says, "I never want to hear that from you again." No excuses, none. She didn't think, what is she saying to my child that led her to believe this? She didn't think, how can I help you through it? She just looked at me and she said, "I don't ever want to hear that from you again." That's the kind of mother I had. Get over it. These are the facts of life that you live in. Now you find a way around it.
So that kind of goes to a pretty wide open topic here around gender and color and the list of accomplishments, the glass ceilings that you have shattered time and time again, whether it's in corporate America, whether it's in philanthropy, whether it's in your financial career. Talk about that, if you would, a little bit of the things that you've learned, the lessons you've learned, the life you've lived, how you've worked your way through those challenges, which I know have been immense.
Well, first of all, again, I had the mother who said no excuses. And I remember this great time that I was talking to one of the Starbucks board members whose name was Olden Lee. And he used to be the head of HR for all of Pepsi. And I got into some riff with him about, discrimination and things like that. And he looked at me and he's like, "Mellody, how long have you been black?" It was like one of my favorite lines ever. It was like, and tell me something I don't know. It was like, we're not going to sit and wax on and admire this problem, as we like to say at Ariel. What are you going to do about it? And so that was something that was important and defining. The other thing, and this is be very much in the spirit of John Wooden, is that I not only did not use an excuse, I said, well, how can this be to my advantage? So for example, in the investment world, there aren't a lot of people like me. And I would go to financial conferences and be the only black woman. And people would come up to me all the time and they say, "You're Mellody." And it was like, I was like Beyonce or Cher. I didn't even have to have a last name because I was the only one. And then I started to say, I can use that to my advantage. Instead of feeling, isolated or obscure, I'm going to actually use these differences to really stand out because I'm going to be probably more memorable than all the other white guys here who are in suits. And so there are ways to turn those things in your favor. And so I've tried to not think about them as challenges, and there are real challenges, real obstacles. I've had too many times where people have come into my office and I've been president and given me their coat, asked for their coffee, then have to sit down at the table with me and I'm the decision maker. Too many meetings where I've sat with people who don't make eye contact with me and assume that a junior white guy who is with me on the Ariel team is in charge. I've had so many examples of things that have just been downright offensive. But I don't see it that way. I see it as, how can I use myself as a tool to be able to show them what is possible? When I was growing up as a kid, my mom used to tell me, "Mellody, you can be or do anything." And I tell people to this day, now I've turned this to my daughter, who's 6 years old, Everest, and I tell her, you can be or do anything, but I've added something to it. I want you to believe that is true of anyone and everyone. I want you to look at people and not put any constraints on them, be it a policeman, a doorman, a CEO, a president of the United States, because she gets to interact with all sorts of people. And I think to have that perspective where you give people the benefit without the doubt could change the nature of society. And so when I've been in those situations, I say, well, how can I be a vessel? Instead of being disgruntled and bitter, how can I turn this into a situation as a learning for people to see me in a different way than perhaps they expected? And you can see when the light bulbs go on. That's the thing that happens. Like, I can see it where people, it's almost like a dog that tilts their head and they're like, she's smart. And it's like, in my mind, I'm like, yep, I hear you. And yes, I am.
So you have a lot of, obviously, very direct experience in the business of finance, and you've had a lot of direct experience in the business of entertainment. And I just wonder, how do you think they are similar and how they are different, and which do you prefer?
Well, I love them both. And I feel like I've had an embarrassment of riches because I've always loved the media world, always. And John Rogers, the co-CEO of Ariel, is here. We've always loved newspapers and news. We both have always loved movies. And so it was a real gift to be able to work alongside of you. And then, of course, I married this iconic filmmaker who's made some movies you've probably heard about. And I have to tell you, I get to see a lot of similarities. So what do I mean by that? Well, first of all, in both businesses, there's a score. So for us and in the investment business, every day we know if we've beaten the benchmark or not. In the movie business, we have the dreaded opening weekend that we would know at the end of the first day if the movie was a success or not.
Those are the old days. Now we know we have about 11 o'clock in the morning. So.
But literally, I'd call Jeffrey, and it's like, did we make it or not? On Friday night, we knew if we had made it or not in terms of the movie.
Yeah, and just to put that in perspective, we spent $175 million making a movie, $175 million marketing the movie. We got $350 million invested, and literally by 8 o'clock on Friday night, that was it.
Yeah, it was a little nerve-wracking.
Yeah.
The other part about it is, which is very similar, is they're both technical and creative. So what people don't realize about the investment business is that the portfolio managers, and in our team, some of them are here, they are like painters. They have a vision for what the portfolio should be. There's math and science to what we do, but there's a lot of art in putting these companies together. And certainly we see that in the movie business, that there's the technical side of a movie, there's visual effects and the like, but that doesn't make for a great movie. You have to have a great story, and that's the creative part that is so important. And then we both have these opinion makers. And my husband is the one who made this clear to me. In the investment world, we have consultants. And consultants tell the clients if they should use Ariel or not. In the movie business, you have film critics. And neither one of them
and agents.
Yes. Neither one of them actually practices the craft, but they have a lot of opinion about it. So those are very, very similar comparisons. But both businesses are, I think they're important businesses. I think the film and movie business and television, et cetera, which I've seen up close, brings joy to people. And I think that's important. And the investment business creates a pathway for people to have the lives that they want financially. And that's equally important. You know, people put down capitalism. And I love the quote from Chuck Schwab, who said, around Schwab, we feel like we're curing cancer. Well, we see the exact same way. Because of us, people can send their kids to the college they want to go to. They can buy their first home. They can start a business. They can retire comfortably. That is a noble calling. They can make money to give away and make our society better. So we see it as something that's very, very, very important.
I love this. You said that, quote, parents are more comfortable talking to kids about sex and drugs than they are talking about money. So talk about financial literacy.
This is an interesting thing. So the reason I make that quote is it's actually true. They polled parents on their comfort level with subject matter, and money ranked way below. And it was things that were easier for parents to talk about sex and drugs, which I think is challenging. The interesting thing about it is it has a lot to do with our fears, and we have tremendous money fears in our society. And those fears, again, you know, I'm back to being brave. Those fears are born out of a lack of knowledge and information because we grow up in a culture where money is not taught in school. So to this day, in high school in America, you can take a class in woodshop or auto and not a class on investing, which always leads me to ask audiences a simple question. Who whittles in their spare time? Like, who is cleaning their own carburetor, right? No one. But you can actually take a wood shop or auto class and not an investing class. And so at Ariel, we've talked a lot about this. Our firm was founded by Judge John Rogers' father, who was a Tuskegee Airman and a pioneer in his own way, a child of the Depression who wanted his child to understand money and gave John stocks every birthday and every Christmas instead of toys. And that childhood hobby led to an obsession that led to our company. But the interesting thing is today, when you think about this issue of kids learning about money, if you've never been taught, you only pass along bad money habits. And if you have fears, whatever you think you fear or whatever habits you have, I promise you, your child is watching you. We see it today with kids. When you tell kids that you can't afford something, they'll say, put it on a credit card, because they actually don't even think of a credit card as money. Think of a life of a child today who only sees a machine spit out money in terms of an ATM and not really be able to intellectually carry through what that means and how it might run out, et cetera. And so as a result of that, I believe, and we believe at Ariel, there's a real need in our society for financial literacy to be taught in schools. And if we had a financially literate society, I don't think we would have had a financial crisis, as an example. We'd have a financially literate Congress. We'd have tax rules that make sense. And I don't say that being facetious, it's just true. And so as a result of that, we decided, again, instead of admiring the problem, we would do something about it. So we actually started a school. And we have 600 students, and most of them are Black. And we have a financial literacy curriculum. And we start in first grade, and we give every first grade class $20,000 real dollars to invest. And the money follows them through their grade school career. And our kids know the difference between saving and investing. They know what opportunity cost is. They know what a service is versus a product. And they can tell you that when they're in 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th grade, as they increasingly take over responsibility for managing the money. And so there are ways to actually change society. There's something we can do about it. And yet, for whatever reason, it is not happening.
So there we go. I keep cutting off the applause. So the Ariel logo is a turtle. And when I visited Mellody and John at their offices, they have one of the greatest collection of all things turtles you could ever imagine. Why is that? And what's that mean to you guys?
So actually, it was John's idea. It was before me. Ariel will be 37 years old this January. I've been there for 28 years. I've had one job since I graduated from college, one phone number. The only person in my class of 1,100 people who's had one phone number the whole time. So Princeton knows how to find me. But what the thing about the turtle was, it was this idea of patient long-term investing. And we tell people we play time arbitrage, that because the world has gotten shorter and shorter term in its thinking, and they think in quarters instead of quarter centuries, we can take advantage of those, that inefficiency that exists by thinking long-term and looking past short-term noise. And so we borrowed from Aesop's fable, where slow and steady wins the race. And it's something that I know John Wooden talked about patience as well, which resonates. And so this idea of if you take a long-term view, if you can look past the noise, that ultimately you can find these great gems, these undiscovered opportunities that have been misunderstood, ignored, underfollowed, and ultimately make money for your investors. And so we love turtles. And everything around us has turtles on it to remind us of being patient. And one of the things that John taught me on my first day at Ariel, he told me every game is won with patience in life. You can't win the Indianapolis 500 in the first lap. The basketball game comes down to the last 2 minutes. Even dating comes down to patience. And God knows it took me until I was 44 to get married, so that was true. But this idea of patience is something that's being lost in our society, but it is an evergreen ideal. And so the turtle is a visual symbol of that, a mascot of sorts for us.
So one of my most favorite things about Mellody is that she has these very precise phrases that she manages to deploy at exactly the right moment. One that she constantly used, or assaulted me with, I should say, when at DreamWorks, was to say, don't major in the minor. Think about that. Pretty powerful, and I did a lot of it. Having said that, one of my other most favored, and I would love you to talk a little bit about it, which is that you urge people to be color brave rather than color blind. Talk a little bit about that.
So a few years ago, I did this TED Talk, and TED had come to me a few times and asked if I would do a TED Talk, and I had turned it down. And at one point, they came and they said, this is the 30th anniversary. If you're ever going to do one, this is the year to do it. And so I decided to do it, and I wrote 2 speeches. And I wrote a speech on financial literacy because my subject matter was passion. And they said, you're in that group of speeches. So I wrote one on financial literacy for the reasons that I've already mentioned. And then I wrote an entire second other speech on race. And I went to people and I said, people that you would know, very, very famous. And I said, which one would you do? And every person said financial literacy. And one person said to me, you do not want to do a speech on race. You are going to be perceived as being a angry black woman. And I said, I'm not, though. It's actually not what it's about, and if not me, who? So ultimately, I decided to do this speech on race, and I decided to do it for a very specific reason. I was tired of being confronted by person after person who would tell me that they were colorblind. And they would say to me, I don't even see race. And I would say, I find that so fascinating because every single person around you is white. And so I said, maybe we should actually change the conversation and you should see race. Because if you saw race, you would see that it's missing. And so instead of colorblind, I'm actually asking you to go into this subject matter that is incredibly uncomfortable, probably the third rail for most people in terms of conversation. I want you to be color brave. I'm back to my brave theme. I want you to embrace this idea of seeing differences because this is a part of my identity. And I want you to see me for who I am, a woman, a black person. I'd gone to a funeral for John Johnson, who was arguably one of the great American entrepreneurs who happened to be black, who started Ebony and Jet magazine. And in his funeral, Tom Joyner, the famous disc jockey, said John Johnson was unapologetically black. And it hit me so hard. And I sat in that seat and I was like, that's what I want to be. I want to be unapologetically black and I want to be unapologetically a woman. I don't want to apologize for who I am. And so this idea of being color brave was to say, see me as who I am, and also embrace these differences, understand your responsibility and how your life could be better if you brought people into your life who don't look like you, who don't think like you, who don't act like you, who don't come from where you come from. And there's all this data, including a great mathematical equation by a gentleman named Scott Page, who's at the University of Michigan, who did the first mathematical equation on diversity, to show that if you're trying to solve a really hard problem, you want diverse thought and diverse intellect. And to make the point, he uses the example of when smallpox was ravaging Europe. And he said when it was ravaging Europe, they brought the best scientific minds of all time together to try to crack the code on what was killing people. And it was a dairy farmer who noticed that the milk maidens were not getting smallpox. And to this day, the smallpox vaccine is bovine-based because of the observations of that dairy farmer. Now, maybe he was Mensa, we don't know. But we do know his unique experience allowed him to see something different. And that's the point that I try to make around this diversity. You know, people hang on to it's the right thing to do. Yes, it is. But it's actually in the best interest of the individual, the company, the school, the society.
God, where does that wisdom come from? Jeez, please. So two last ones here, because they're giving me a little wrap-up sign there. So your family is building this remarkable museum in downtown Los Angeles. It is, without a question, the most ambitious, and I would predict will be one of the most impactful acts of philanthropy to enhance culture, specifically in the city of Los Angeles. Talk a little bit about both the vision and the opportunity for the Narrative Museum.
So I have to say it's my husband's vision that started it. We're co-chairs of the museum. We have two distinct roles. So George has been the art collector. The C collection is from our family. It's thousands and thousands of pieces. I think it's about 100,000 pieces altogether. And there's a smaller component of it. It is not a Star Wars museum, but a small component of it that is Star Wars. But a bigger component of it is art that tells a story, that is narrative. And the idea is that in one picture, you tell an entire story, one frame. One of the great narrative artists was, of course, Norman Rockwell. We have a giant Rockwell collection. And you can think about all of his pictures and how they told the story of American life during that time. There are many, many other artists who have done that, from illustrators like N.C. Wyeth and Maxfield Parrish to contemporary artists as well. Kara Walker. I mean, there are so many who tell a narrative. And George believes very strongly that, especially in the eyes of young people, to be able to stand and look at a piece of art that is popular, something that speaks to them, and he thinks art creates an emotional connection between the person and the viewer, that you cannot be told what you like when it comes to art. You have to feel it emotionally, and that it should not be explained to you, it just comes naturally. That the idea that you can frame a perspective for young people to think beyond all of their circumstances by being in a creative environment can change their trajectory. So he wants a sign at the opening of the museum that says, "Imagination begins here." I, on the other hand, want it to be the most inclusive place you've ever been. A place that when people walk into it, no matter who they are, they believe they belong there. So I call it a really, really, really expensive community center. I also say it's a school for schools. And so that schools, we have over 100 schools in the immediate vicinity of our museum that will ultimately come there, school children from both USC, that other school, I shouldn't have mentioned the name, to the high schools and grade schools that are around us. So first we start with the fact that this is a building for the community, then it's a building for Los Angeles, then it's a building for the United States, and then for the world. But we start with the fact that it was first built for the community. And my vision is when I walk through there, I'm gonna see all these black and brown kids who say, they built this for me. And that's the most important thing for me. And for George, is that they then see things that inspire them to look beyond the lives that they have and dream gigantic dreams.
So there are some amazing students here in the room tonight. Maybe as a last parting would be some advice as they go out into the world and the challenges and the opportunities and complications of the world that we live in today. You have any little pithy major and the minor thing to share with them?
I have so many things, but I think that I'm going to give you 3 that have made a difference in my life. The first I feel so strongly about is speak your truth, whatever it is. That doesn't mean that it's the truth, but it's your truth. So many people run away from their truth in order to fit in or to be accepted, and I just do not think that's right. You end up giving away a lot of yourself in the process. So whatever your truth is, I think you should speak it. Speak it out loud. Don't hold it inside. The second thing I would say is what John Rogers taught me, is to be patient. So much of our society has turned into an impatient culture. We want things when we want it, where we want it, how we want it. And because of that, we don't have the ability or the willingness as much as we used to wait. And so I think that just the practice of waiting and taking a long-term view is something that I think leads to great outcomes. And I see that again all the time. Someone wants that promotion, and so they leave a really great job because they think they can get it faster somewhere else. Just waiting can ultimately work out. And then last but not least, I would say we started this conversation with, be brave. There are times when I do feel fear, and Jeffrey may not know it because I don't show it, but I am talking to myself inside my head saying, you have nothing to lose. You know, in this moment where you are confronting tremendous power, your voice matters. You count. Say what you believe. If they don't accept it, at least you try. That would again be in the spirit of John Wooden. And the idea that if you can be brave, if you can overcome these moments of pangs of anxiety, a lack of confidence, a feeling of being an imposter, if you can overcome that and get to the other side of it, you will have so much more sense of accomplishment and fulfillment than if you had said nothing. It may not work out, it may not mean people will listen to you, but this idea of just overcoming that fear is something that I think is so important. Fear is inside of all of us, every single person, no matter who you are. And just to be able to wrestle that to the ground on occasion, I think makes all the difference. So speak your truth, be patient, be brave.
Mellody Hobson.
Please welcome the Vice Chairman of Credit Suisse and Chairman of UCLA Anderson's Board of Advisors, Bob Merle.
Good evening, Bruins. What a wonderful evening, and I just want to say to Jeffrey and to Mellody, thank you so much for the privilege of engaging in the conversation with us. All of us in this room believe in shared learning. I am so confident in saying that we have learned a great deal from both of you tonight. Thank you so much again for participating in this. Well, I have this little award here, and you've all heard a lot about it. But I do want to just say, you know, Dean Bernardo said earlier this evening that the John Wooden Global Leadership Award was established to honor a corporate and civic leader who embodies the values that John Wooden espoused and are best exemplified in his pyramid of success. The award is all about character, it's all about courage and integrity, and work ethic, and teamwork. It's all about being at your best when your best is needed, and it's all about winning with principle. And I'm confident that he would be very proud to know that the award in his name is being given to Mellody Hobson, because she personifies the values embraced by John Wooden. Mellody, you know, we have known one another for many years, both from our time together in Sweet Home Chicago, but also from our common affection for a small college in New Jersey that happens to favor orange and black. But I want to say, you look great in blue and gold. And like everyone who knows you well, and who's spoken about you tonight, I have the deepest respect and admiration for you, both personally and professionally, for so many reasons. You know, your leadership role at Ariel Investments with your longtime partner and mentor, John Rogers, your service as a director of several of the most prestigious and successful corporations in the world, your nationally recognized voice on financial literacy, and also investor education, particularly for those from disadvantaged backgrounds, your bold and inspiring call to encourage open and honest conversations about race, and your commitment to philanthropy, community engagement, and service above self. You always put service above self. It is clear that you are blessed with an uncommon combination of brilliant intellect and interpersonal skills, and you have your feet planted firmly on the ground, but you've always had your eyes on the horizon. And like Coach Wooden, I believe you have moral authority because of your values and how you have lived your life. There's an old saying that leaders are like eagles. They tend not to flock. You have to find them one at a time. Mellody, you are an eagle. And while I do love that analogy, permit me to end with a slightly different one that hopefully will resonate with your life partner, George, and to put it in his terms, you are the brightest star in the Star Wars galaxy, okay? Mellody is, on behalf of UCLA Anderson School, it is a personal privilege and an honor to present you with the John Wooden Global Leadership Award.
Well, first off, I have to thank my friend Jeffrey. As I said, we are dear to each other, and so I really appreciate all of your preparation and your good questions, Jeffrey. I also want to thank Bob. Bob and I served on the Princeton board together. He stayed a lot longer than I did, 20 years. I did 4 years of duty. And I remember Bob, in one of his speeches that he gave to all of us as trustees, I will never forget the line. He talked about when he left to go to Princeton and the background that he came from, which was very humble. And I've used this line many times. He said that his mother told him, "Remember who you are and whose you are." And I have never forgotten that line that he said that day at Princeton. So thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. I'm so thrilled to be here tonight to celebrate UCLA Anderson School of Management. Many of you know that my husband attended that other school in California. It's already been mentioned, you know, the one with the great film school, but with the basketball team that never won a championship. He went to that school. He wasn't able to be here tonight. It's not out of protest. I just want you to know that he had a conflict, and he had to take care of that newly introduced baby Yoda that you maybe heard about. But he is here in spirit, and he's very happy that our family now has this recognition. So please know he's sad to miss it. What makes this award especially meaningful for me is that it bears the name of an exceptional person. That's already been said over and over again. And now you have to understand something about me to really put this award in context for you. First and foremost, two of the biggest influences of my life outside of my family are basketball players. So the first was Hall of Fame basketball player Bill Bradley, whom you saw already. He walked me down the aisle at my wedding. That's how close we are. And the second is Ariel, co-CEO, and one of my best friends in the whole world. I have a cadre of these difficult guys that I'm friends with. Jeffrey, John, George, I could keep going. But John is the one who broke me in first. And John was also the captain of his Princeton team. Now, after Princeton, I didn't go to business school, but John made sure I got a really excellent education. And how did he do that? He had me read about all the great investors. I read about Buffett and Drummond and Templeton. You name them, I got schooled on great investors. But he also, in equal measure, had me read about great coaches. So first and foremost, he had Pete Carroll, Hall of Fame basketball player, and there's a refrain at Ariel. Pete Carroll is a running narrative at our firm. And of course, from Pete Carroll, we learn the more you help your teammates, the more you help yourself. And then, of course, he had me read about Vince Lombardi, one of my favorite books I've ever read, When Pride Still Mattered. Vince Lombardi had me when he said life was a distraction from football. I said, I understand this man. Not about football, but about the things that I was passionate about. But then I learned more from him when he said, again, back to the idea of bravery, fatigue makes cowards of us all. That's one of the comments that Vince Lombardi had that really sat with me. And then John had me read about Bill Russell, and he said that we have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. And he talked about the importance of listening, something that I still need to work on, according to John. And then last but not least, there was Wooden. John was obsessed with Coach Wooden. And 25 years ago, he handed me a book of his advice. And I learned that even if you can't execute a pick and roll, you can still become obsessed with Coach Wooden. I devoured his book and his wise words, and they really took up resonance in my brain, so much so that if you had told me then that 25 years later I'd be standing here accepting an award in his name, I'd say that just simply is not possible. I still think about the passage, everyone has described it, about the socks, right? That you had to put them on a certain way, no creases, no folds. He also said, be quick and never hurry, and that really resonated with us, the patient investors, right? Talking about the benefits of thinking long term. Coach Wooden believed in the importance of everyday precision. Attention to detail and effort led to excellence. That is true of basketball. It's equally true of investing. I think it's basically true of all things. He understood that there's a price you pay for achievement, and if you give anything less than your all, you shortchange yourself. He said details matter. effort matters, character matters. These things really spoke to me. Now, Coach Wooden, for him, character meant being honest, trustworthy, a lifelong learner, selfless. He advised us to cultivate character in ourselves and in our leaders. And if he said, if that is missing, make a change. You don't stick with someone who doesn't have that character. I love the fact that he said honesty was non-negotiable, and never lie was at the top of his list of rules that he lived by. He actually worried that there was something corny, hokey about stating the obvious. But today, I'm actually quite concerned whether it's obvious at all. I find it beyond disturbing how often we are actually debating truth in our society. And I feel like it's time this corny, age-old adage, this age-old ideal actually made a comeback. And here's the thing about truth. Here's the thing about truth. Truth is a team sport. It's up to us to make it happen. It's up to us to hold each other accountable. And so I will cherish this award because of what John Wooden represented. But I also, in that same vein, I accept it with both humility and, as he would want, enthusiasm. Thank you so very much.